Hey guys, part 2. I'm not sure how long this will be actually until I put it together. The experiment seems to have worked out. You'll see at the end, it appears to work. I had my doubts for a lot of reasons, and there were some very tricky dimensions that I had to take first, and these pins that I made were extraordinarily awkward because they were relatively high tolerance. But anyway, in principle I think we've got there. So I won't waffle anymore. So here's your part 2. After this, I don't know quite what will happen. Some of you may have heard we're in middle of next week. We're in for desperately low temperatures and sustained like for ages. So I don't know, the shop may be totally uninhabitable. We'll try and come up with something, but anyway, that's the last major project I had in mind. I've got 2 or 3 other things I'd like to get on with, but we'll have to see. Anyway, enough waffle again. Thanks for watching if you got to this stage, and hope to see you later sometime. Bye for now. I measured the plate rather quickly earlier. I thought, oh yeah, it's 3/8. It isn't, it's 10 mil. And because the boss on my 4-jaw is slightly larger diameter than the 3-jaw, I don't want that to get in the way, and I've got to stay clear of the bearing housing cover. So I'm just taking a 1/15 skim off here. It's not very critical. I'm just set up on I've got a centre 1-inch parallel just to give support. Oh, it's gone out of frame, isn't it? Let's have a look from the other side. Yeah, that's nice. I've lost my chamfers, of course. I'll have to just sand those edges to break them. Otherwise, all right. So we've got to set it up vertical for the next job. Just found the edge on here so I can get my centre, and then you might see the markings. I don't know, we've got marking each side. We've got to mill off a flat on each side so we can then drill through for a couple of bolts. I wanted to get 1/4-20 in, but they're a little bit big, so we're going to go with 10/24, which I think will do. Now I've just got to mill some flats each side here so we can drill through for the clamp bolts. It's going to take a few passes. I'll finish this side and then do the other, show you a bit of that. I suddenly realised I was climb milling on one pass. Getting too excited. A little bit of deburring. That's it should be all right. Again, not too critical. Just need somewhere to drill on and take the bolt head. I nearly started climb milling again in that little sequence, you may have noticed. And this aluminum resonates a little bit, so I wasn't taking huge cuts. I was a bit careless earlier. I dragged something along here and scratched it up. Never mind. Well, I've drilled this side for tapping. Just doing this one. You've got to go down just over half inch and a half. It was about as close as it gets. I don't know whether you noticed the chuck here was getting very close, so I just managed to get the depth I want. All I've got to do now is put in clearance holes, and then we can slit it and do some tapping, bit by bit by bit. One clearance hole to come. Switch over to the other side and get that one done. Set up for the first side. I'm using a fairly thin slitting saw. I don't think this one runs very true, but they never do they? My marking on here is fairly approximate. It's pretty much the halfway mark. And we'll see how we go. Only just made it. Well, I just got to finish the last bit. I haven't got a larger diameter saw that'll do the job. You might notice that there's a whisker left on that side, and the same will happen here probably. It is literally a whisker, so I can finish that by hand, get the main cut done anyway. Yeah, there you are. It won't take much to release that. There we are. That's it for that stage. And I've got to tap these bottom pieces later. We've got this tapped now. And just offered it up on here. Seems pretty reasonable. You might be able to see it's a pretty good fit, and I've got just a little bit of daylight at the back to clear the bearing cover. I'm not sure whether it'll have a small amount of, well, call it wobble if you like, but it is running pretty true, and that actually is not overly important. So what we've got to do is I've got to work out a way next to decide whether to fit this when a chuck is on or pre-fit it, and then I've got to work out how to get a chuck backplate pin or bolt to engage in this. Got to work out what's going to be best for that. We'll have to see. Now I know I always talk too much, but I thought I'd get you up to speed on where we're at with this project. I've got to make some basically some pins, and the choice of size is based on a number of parameters, and I may describe those later if I don't cover it all now. I'm going to use a 3/8 pin turned down to 5/16 and threaded 5/16/18, and this end, which has got to go into the aluminum collar, I'm going to turn down to 1/4. I didn't really want to, but the thing is, I don't want to have too big a slot in the top of the collar and risk weakening it too much. It's all a compromise. I'd like to have gone to 1/2 inch, but in fact the chuck back plates also make for a problem. 1/4 would be too small, so that's what we're going to go with, hopefully. And I've got some dimensions done, and we've got to get some work done in the lathe to make 2 pins. They're both different. Now I've had both chuck back plates off, and they're both drilled now and threaded 5/16. This slight ring here, I had to relieve that a little bit for the shoulder of the 3/8 to sit, and this one is quite close to the boss, so really it's a fair old compromise. Why I couldn't go a lot bigger. Whether it's going to be strong enough, it all remains to be seen. The last stage here is making the pins, which is actually a hell of a fiddle. I started off and made these 2 pieces, and having got them threaded, realised that the I couldn't chuck them up to do the other end because I've got a very critical dimension in the middle. This also was some 3/8 I got from the hardware store. I'd run out of 3/8. It's plated, it's crap, it's made in Taiwan, it's undersized for 3/8, and it's extremely stringy and gnarly. So I've elected to put a piece of, I've got a piece of 12mm here. I'm turning it down to nominal 3/8, which is not that critical, and then I'm going to put the thread on this end. This one's for the bison chuck, and then we've got to set up very accurately for this section, and I'll use a parting tool back here to get down to where I need to be. And I'm not going to bother with much of this because it's purely small scale fiddle. Well, here are the 2 drive pins, shall we say. That one's for the 4-jaw, and this one is for the 3-jaw. And I think I mentioned earlier, the choice of thread size was down to a number of factors. 5/16 is fairly good anyway. I'm getting in the light. But the other end of each is a 1/4 inch, reduced from the 3/8. And that's because, I think I pointed it out before, the thickness of the collar here, I don't want to take too much out of it, so that's why I'm going for a 1/4. So I'm just going to mill a slot in here now as an engagement slot for the pins. It's 1/4 deep. That's about as far as I want to go. I ought perhaps to go just a smidgen more in case I've got any disparity on my measurements. Let's just see. I don't know if I can get at this. Let's try it from underneath. just a little bit tight. Yeah, I'll have to just enlarge that very, very slightly. It's supposed to be a 1/4 inch end mill. Right, I've gone about 1,000 a bit plus. That one's a nice fit. I think that'll be alright, but this other one is probably just a few tenths. It's very close, so I'll put that in the lathe and just polish it, and then they'll be both ready to go. All the machining's done now. There's the pin in the forejaw, and that's that should be good to go. I'm just looking at the shoulder. This is fairly critical to, you know, plus or minus a thou or two really, that distance. And there's the pin for the three jaw when we get to it. So that roughly, that's pretty well centered. That's how the forejaw will sit in the collar. And the pin for the forejaw, again, very can you see it? The pin for the forejaw is also very critical. That distance being very, well, that is the critical part really. And the other thing, which I'm just not sure of at all, this collar possibly should have been made out of steel. Not that I've got any that large actually, I don't think. But the point is, this has got to grip on a very small area. Very small area. You've seen on other shots. This is very, very small. And when we go into reverse, it's going to put a lot of stress on the pin and the collar. At very best, it'll stay put. It's at medium best, it'll slip slightly, but the chuck won't actually undo. Worst case scenario, it won't have enough grip at all, and the chuck will not come off. I mean, it's going to limit that, but it's going to let the chuck undo a certain amount, which is going to be a pain. So we're going to see. Oh my, well, we seem to have got there, although I've forgotten to deburr a little bit there. Alright, so here, in fact this bolt's somewhat in the way. There's the pin, there's the slot, there's the collar. I've taken it up pretty tight. One reason I used very long bolts, the thread comes down about 3/4. Now the one thing I have noticed is that I can't get it running completely true. It's clearing the bearing cover. Maybe I've got to take a smidgen off that pin, but it's just the fact that this lower part won't sit quite as far in, and that annoys me because it's not running dead true. But from a functional point of view, it's doing the job. You can see if I run forwards, it's pretty ugly. Now I've done a reverse twice. Whether it'll work each time, I don't know. obvious sign of movement. I've got a mark on the boss here. I can see if anything did shift. Reverse again. Again, looking at my cheat mark, nothing's moved. So I suppose I can say it's a success. I don't know how it'll work out over time. And I don't use reverse very often, but now and again it's almost vital, and I've done without it for years. Now this, I haven't weighed this chuck, but this chuck is probably at least 50% heavier than the 4-jaw. So I reckon if this doesn't shake loose in reverse, the 4-jaw should be alright. And I'll probably get round to trying that soon, but for the time being this is the one that matters. One more time, reverse. Visual inspection. No, it's right over the cheat mark. So there we are, that's the end of that project. A lot of fun and games.